Now, Sargon here did the unthinkable and actually watched Lords of Rings of Power Plus Privilege. So he is one of the few people that has accomplished this feat. And he noticed something very interesting that was discussed, and that is the fact that the writers are trying to humanize the orcs. And as usual, like they will find something incredibly niche that is mentioned in a book in order to say that, well, no, actually, Tolkien himself wanted to do this, and it's perfectly canon. And obviously, the media jumped to the writer's defense, despite the fact that people were upset about this change. And as I'm reading this, I noticed that this is not a one-off. Like, this has been happening for quite a while. If you look at Dungeons and Dragons, they eliminated the concept of evil races altogether. If you play Age of Wonders, they also eliminated the concept of evil races. If you watch shows like Picard, the races are just humans that are cosplaying. Like the Romulans don't behave like Romulans. The Vulcans don't behave like Vulcans. There's no more racial identity in fantasy. And it looks like it's a conspiracy theory, right? But all of this comes from the academia, and you can see it happening as back as 3 years ago when this nonsense was pushed. And extra credits says that evil races are bad game design. So you need to understand, despite the fact that it looks as if all these companies that are creating entertainment are separate, they're probably from different countries. Some of them shouldn't have anything to do with each other because one of them is making video games, another one is making tabletop games, and another one may be making video games. But they all share the exact same teams. They all share the exact same ideology, and this is due to the consultants. The consultants aren't that many. There's just a dozen of them that are of renown, and they are tasked with, quote-unquote, helping the writers. And they are the ones that are injecting all of this nonsense. This is why you constantly see the girl boss everywhere. This is why you see body type A, body type B, and pronouns in every video game. It's because the consultants, they go from company to company, and they lecture the actual talented writers, the people that actually wrote something for a living, on how to properly write. And they bring this nonsense, right? So they bring it from an authoritarian point of view, from a point of view where you cannot have a conversation or a discussion. They know. They're like communing with the divine, and they know how something needs to be done, and you either get to do what they do or you get out. And obviously this is soul crushing for people with talent and creativity, but it is what it is. So the question is like, why are they so obsessed about showing orcs in a positive light? Why do they do this? Well, it's a different mindset altogether. For people like Tolkien and the people that wrote Star Trek, as well as the people that made Age of Wonders and the original people that made Dungeons and Dragons, for them this is purely fiction. Their work is purely to entertain. Orcs do not actually exist. Elves do not actually exist. All of this is made-believe in order to entertain people, to create an interesting story from which some morality can sometimes be drawn. Like in the case of Lord of the Rings, you can draw the concept of friendship between Frodo and between his fellowship. You can also draw the concept that some people are evil for a reason, like in the case of Gollum. Other people, like the orcs, are just evil because they are. You can drag the concept that temptation is bad. You know, like there's a lot of themes that's up for the reader to interpret. And usually they're not outright spoken, but again, it's up to the reader to understand, okay, well, the dwarves, they're honorable, but their problem is greed. Like, look what greed does to a motherfucker. So the purpose of the old works was to entertain. I keep saying that in the case of Lord of the Rings, like you have all these races that have different traits and uniqueness, and they often hate each other. Like the dwarves and the elves hate each other, but they have to put aside their differences in order to stop the orcs. And by doing so, it creates drama, it creates tension, it creates interesting story dynamics. It is believable that by the end of the book, Legolas and Gimli are friends, despite the fact that their races hate each other, and you as a reader can genuinely see the journey through which they went. But this is not what the consultants are interested in. Like, they're not interested in creating entertainment. They are interested in spreading the ideology that their university professor taught them. And there is a university professor that wrote a very interesting PhD on feminism, where he basically says, or she basically said, I think it was a woman, she basically says that her purpose is not to educate students, but to create students like a virus. Like, after they finish university, they will infect all of these cells, which are various companies and institutions, and the purpose of a virus is to subvert the cell so that the cell doesn't do what it's supposed to do, but just constantly replicates the virus. And this is pretty much what wokeness does. This is what these consultants are trying to do. They're not trying to create entertainment. They know that their ideology is rotten and boring. Like, if they were to just create a website that just pushes wokeness, no one would read it. No one has any interest in reading something like that. So they need to use cells, in this case entertainment, like a Trojan horse. Like, they need to infect Lord of the Rings so that Lord of the Rings doesn't produce entertainment, which is what it's supposed to do, but instead just constantly produces wokeness. So one of their biggest things is that by controlling the entertainment, and especially controlling the messages from entertainment, it controls how people think. Because if people don't think outside the box, and everywhere people look, everywhere, they look at the football field and they see people taking a knee, they look at Lord of the Rings and they're getting lectured by privilege and the elves taking their jobs, and then they look at Dungeons and Dragons and they're being lectured about homophobia and they see pronouns. But by surrounding people with wokeness everywhere, they have no chance but to be woke. Because it's like a computer. Like, if the input is generated in a certain manner, then the output can also be predictable. So, they are basically trying to say, by having good orcs, they are basically trying to destroy the concept of heroes. They are basically trying to say that there are no heroes. Because if the orcs actually are good, that they can be reasoned with, then Aragorn is a piece of shit. Aragorn should have opened the borders of the city and allow the orcs to come in, because they just want to raise their children and they just want to have a normal lives just like humans and elves. And humans and elves are the real bigot, right? So, like, you need to think, like, what you get from that movie is that, like, what if I'm an American and America itself is evil? Like, what if the government is evil because it's keeping people up and it's not opening the borders, it's not just welcoming everyone here because everyone is the same, they don't have different cultures. Like, everyone in reality, all over the world, they're American at heart. Like, it doesn't matter if they're from Palestine or Israel or Pakistan. It's like, everyone is American at heart. But, they just happen to live in places that are filled with poverty, and if we let them all here, that is the correct thing to do. So, like, this is the message that they're trying to say. It's trying to say that there is no such thing, like, even in fantasy, there is no such thing as evil. It's just like people are behaving in a way because of socioeconomic consequences. So the orcs, they're evil because of socioeconomic consequences. Like, they live in Mordor. If they were born in the Shire, then they would have been very well-adjusted, calm, collected individuals like the hobbits. So this is what they're trying to push. And again, no one would read such a story. But because it's Lord of the Rings, it sells by the brand, it's a Trojan horse, they infected the cell, and now people want to see Lord of the Rings, but instead they get this garbage. And also the other side of the coin is suppression. The reason, like, they hate anime like Attack on Titan is because it has an actual conversation about ancestry and past. The reason they hate anime like Legacy of Shield Hero is because the main character is being falsely accused of rape. So, like, they don't want people to think of something that's not woke. Like, to engage with a concept that may run counter to the narrative that they're trying to create. The reason they don't like games like Wukong is because of the character design. Like, Wukong has no pronouns. Wukong doesn't have female characters that look like men coming from California. And it goes against the message. It like, shows people that there is something else. And they don't want you to explore anything else. They want you to live in their fantasy. And their fantasy should be everywhere. In sports, in Gillette commercials, in beer commercials, in Lord of the Rings, in Dungeons and Dragons, in Age of Wonders, and like everywhere you touch should be their world, their ideology. So this is why they do this. It's not because like they thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if Orc? No, it's not interesting because like we already expected this because for the last 3 years this is the standard, right? So there is no more interesting. It's not like, oh, let's do a one out. Like you already did it. People already seen many examples where, well, actually the bad guys, you know, they're not really bad. It's just... Let me know what you guys think though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.